7 walks. My dad's been for about 2 years. So I know Alex here. I live with
You know Frank. Welcome. If I could invite you all to be seated.
There we go. I say just take up front. Okay.
It's my privilege to welcome you all here. My name is Jared Commutis, and I'm the assistant headmaster at the Chesterton Academy of St. Margaret, Cultura. And it is a blessing to have all of you here this night, especially on the feast day of St. Thomas Aquinas. This is the St. Thomas Aquinas classroom, so quite an honor to have everyone here tonight. And it is also a blessing for me to introduce Fletcher Williams. He and I taught together at Knoxville Catholic High School for 5 years together. So I was teaching there for 12 years, and this is his 7th year teaching at the high school. So he's been a Catholic educator throughout his career, and he is a member of the Institute for Advanced Physics, and he's going to share a very interesting talk with us tonight. And you can see the title here, The Physics You Didn't Know You Learned is Emptying Your Life. He's going to talk about how errors in physics have contributed to the cultural decline that we see around us, and can even contribute to a cultural decline that we may even be a part of without realizing it. And so he's going to help us to learn more about that topic. Also, he, and most importantly, is married to Hannah, and they're blessed with their 3 children, and she and the children are here this night as well. So they have a beautiful family, and we're so glad that you guys are all able to join us. Afterwards, I'm sure he'll be available for any questions that you might have, and they've brought some materials that would be of interest to you afterwards as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Williams. Also, I would like to start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for the gift of this day and for bringing us together. We thank you also for the great gift to the Church of St. Thomas Aquinas and his teachings. We pray, Lord, that through his intercession and through our study of truth, that it would always lead us to you, the source and fullness of all truth. And we ask for the intercession of our Blessed Mother as we pray together. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. St. Margaret Clitheroe, pray for us. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, well, welcome. Glad you can make it out for this talk. Physics you didn't know you learned, so I'm going to try and help you see there's some physics that you all know, independent of how many classes you've had or not had. And it is emptying your life, I'm trying to say, but there's a solution, and we'll talk about it. So first, just, he mentioned I'm a member of the Institute for Advanced Physics, so just a little bit to say about that. So this was founded in 2003. You can see our patron is St. Thomas Aquinas, so it's very exciting on the feast of St. Thomas to be here. The mission, IAP, is established to advance modern science in a balanced fashion that does not leave behind the correct philosophical foundations or the proper moral and spiritual components. And the founder and director is this Dr. Anthony Rizzi right here, who's a first-class physicist. So as part of his graduate thesis, he solved this 80-year-old problem in Einstein's theory that was left unsolved. That was his thesis. And then went on to be a part of the Nobel Prize-winning team at LIGO. That's Louisiana. They measured these gravitational waves that won the Nobel Prize in 2017, among other things. And then he's also a renowned Thomist, really recognized as a world-class expert on the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas. And so, just a bit of background on the organization and the source of where I've learned these things I'm going to be sharing with you. And so to get us started, I'd like to tell a story of Chesterton. Here we are at the Chesterton Academy. So this was a story that's been told of him that the Times sent out this inquiry asking people, what's wrong with the world today? And you can always count on Chesterton to have a pithy answer to this. And so it's very short. Dear sir, I am. You know. So that's Chesterton for you. But I want us to think about that because it really is the right answer. And it's not just Chesterton. It's all of us are a part of a problem that we have today. And sometimes I think, you know, for religious people, it's easy to kind of look out there and say, okay, it's other people. It's these bad people that don't have the faith. They're the problem. You know, this political party is the problem, or whatever else, and not, you know, like the scripture says, let's take the log out of our own eye. And this is an unexpected log that I'm about to present to you. So I just want to encourage you to be like Chesterton and have that openness to seeing where the problem lies. And, you know, for those of us who've had, you know, a really deep conversion or experience of the faith, you know, you might have already had to deal with, like, okay, facing your sinfulness and facing, okay, yeah, you know, I make a lot of mistakes. I do things. I want to be a better person. And obviously that's a big problem. But the problem that I'm going to be pointing out tonight is not so much the sin as it is the error. The deep error and confusion that's not just limited to one religion or political party or group of people, but that it really is a universal cultural problem that all of us share. So that's what I want us to be open to here. So, you know, you probably are aware our culture is in very deep trouble. And it's really like never has existed before in history, right? So you can this is just a succinct list. This is not all the problems, but, you know, we have transgenderism, which, by the way, you know, think about that. Like, it really goes beneath paganism. There's never been anything like this in history that a man has thought he can become a woman or vice versa. It's never existed before. Homosexuality normalized and celebrated, treated as, you know, marriage. Break up the family. No-fault divorce legalized, which, you know, in case you don't know what that means, it means that you can just get a divorce because I'm just tired of this person, and that's all there is to it. You know, it used to be illegal. The school shootings, you know, that's really like a 20-year-old issue. That's never, like children shooting children. It's never really happened before, like the late 1990s. Obviously abortion, most, you know, a lot of Catholics can see that's a mega problem, all the millions of innocent lives being lost to abortion. Pornography, drug use, I have this point, prayer being taken out of schools. A lot of people don't know that, you know, it used to be in public schools, there's prayer. And today we probably, even as Catholics, feel like, oh, but that's kind of, what if they don't believe it? That's kind of like imposing your religion on people. But that was a normal thing, because especially in America, it was understood that this is part of reality. So we're going to have prayer in schools because it's the right thing to do. And just, you know, increasing attacks on Western civilization as a whole. So, I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a big mess, you know. That's what we've got. You know, you may be aware, but, you know, Christianity's down. This graph starts at 1972 here. Christianity, you know, percentage of the American population is Christian, around 90%. And then now we're down, as of a couple years ago, 63%. And then you see the rise of the nuns, right? No religious affiliation whatsoever, is now at 29%. And just asking, you know, Americans, do you believe in God, is now at 81%, which, like, okay, if we want to compare ourselves to the rest of the first world, still pretty good, you know. Think of Europe and Canada and other places, but it's a huge drop. And so we're losing a deep Christian grounding that we've had in our country that has guided our nation for most of its existence. So, you know, that's some of the bad things to be aware of what's going on. And, you know, you might look at this and might say, well, okay, it's a mess, but I've got my Catholic faith, so I'm fine. It's just those people, you know, they've got the problem. I'm not doing these awful things. And the thing, like I said, I hope to show you is that the same things that are generating those evil things are in us too. That those bad principles are in us. And the other thing is a common response to say, well, what the source of that is? It's just lack of faith. If people just had more faith, it would fix it. And if people are just materialistic. So it's essentially saying it's a will problem. All these people, they're just choosing to be bad. They know better. And it's not true. So just to address those two in particular, looking at the decline in Christianity, say, okay, lack of faith. This is a symptom. This is not a root cause. This is something that arises in this modern context that we have when we have false principles in our thinking that make the faith not make sense to us. So that's really what's at the heart of it, is that a messed up way of thinking that makes the faith opaque. And then the flip side of that claim is that, in fact, the issue is not lack of faith, but actually that's all we have is faith. People, we don't have knowledge. We don't have knowledge of true principles that we could then use to then sort out and figure out what the truth of the matter is. Like how many times have you heard people, they start to have some kind of a disagreement, and well, let's just agree to disagree. Right? And where does that come from? It's that, well, there's no getting the truth. Forget that. I mean, you have your system, you're Catholics, or you're Jewish, or you're nothing. That's your system. And so you find your clique of people, you associate, have your little echo chamber, and then that's it. There's no principles to actually sort it out. And then on the materialism issue, again, this is a symptom. There is a problem with materialistic behavior today, but that's not the source of all the things that we're seeing. That's a symptom. What happens? What's actually the case is we have a hyper spiritualistic culture, and what I mean by that is not like saying a lot of prayers. What I mean is a state in which we're focused on our own mental constructions, on the ways that we assign meaning to things. We're not looking at reality and accepting reality as it is. We're imposing whatever system or construct we have on things. And then, of course, the downside to that is that, well, if you live in a world that you're constantly making up, you do still have a human nature, and so you feel a deep despair and a deep anguish, and that's what then leads to this materialistic behavior. We need drugs, we need mindless television and entertainment and stuff to just numb the pain of dealing with a world that has no meaning. So just to be clear, that's a symptom that's arising from a deeper issue, this focus on our own mental constructions. So where does the true source lie? Okay, it's not these things. So the answer is it has to do with the bad physics that we all have. But obviously that needs a lot of unpacking. So this is a 400-year-old problem that starts with the invention of the modern scientific method 400 years ago, but it's never understood. And it's used with ever-increasing success, and then it starts to accrue. It starts to change the way that we think as a culture, and it leads to this mental construct-centered way of thinking. And so just to be clear, obviously I majored in physics, I'm studying physics now, it's an amazing thing. So like what I'm saying is not to say, oh, physics is just this bad thing, you need to, like some people, like just, oh, I should avoid science, like let's just get out of science. Like, no, that's not the answer. Like science is so good, it's so important, especially as Catholics, we have to engage with it. So, all the astrophysics and particle physics and quantum, all this stuff, if you don't know about these things, you should read about it. And then not to mention the technological fruits, like this is where that cell phone thing, pretty important to us, the cell phone depends upon quantum mechanics. I don't know if you knew that, but it does. It's the invention of the transistor is a quantum mechanical breakthrough. MRIs and GPS obviously really, really good stuff. But the thing you should notice is that, when you have a profound evil, like I listed with all those problems, it means there's something really, really good back behind it that's been twisted. Because an evil doesn't have any existence on its own. Evil is the perversion or the twisting of some good. And so the more profound the evil, the more profound the good thing that's been twisted behind it. Right? I mean, you think like, it's only because, the only way you get something as evil as like the Nazis is to have someone like Hitler who's really smart and strong and mind and body to be able to do what he did. You don't have a snail, take over the world and destroy everybody. And then like the devil himself, right? The highest of the angels, right? Who falls and becomes the chief enemy of the church. So that's the thing, is like you have to see like science is really, really good, and it's because it's been misunderstood and distorted that it's leading to these deep problems. And so the Institute for Advanced Physics has a very succinct theorem. I know you like theorems, I'm sure, right? A succinct theorem that just breaks it down and says, okay, how do we see the source of the problems in the physics? And so I'll try and break this down. I'll try and go through it all at once here, and then we'll go down step by step. So first, everything we know comes through what we know through the senses. So physics, the study of the physical world, is the first science. Okay, so therefore, all other branches of learning depend upon this first science. Okay, so then if our physics is wrong, to that degree, so is everything else. Okay, then we look at the physics that we have. So what physics do we have? It's an equational physics. It's one that deals with system of symbols, focuses on an equation, ends with an equation, not a fully physical understanding. And so it makes our physics incomplete. It's still focused on our minds. And what's the result of that is that since all of our cultural thinking builds upon what we think about the physical world, and since we have this incomplete symbol physics, all of our thinking is at best unstable and confused and often downright wrong and crazy. So that's in a very succinct form. the theorem that shows us how the physics leads to the problems that we have today. But let's go through it piece by piece. I mean, first of all, we haven't thought about a lot of these things as a culture. So first, everything we know comes through what we know through the senses. So do you see that? Really, like everything. So okay, it's like obviously there's the things in front of my face. I see these people in front of me and everything. But like higher things, like even talking about God. Everything that you think about God is only understandable through the things you know through the senses. And so like you talked about him, the creator, being all-powerful, almighty, and so forth. Those are all analogies to things that we first know through the senses. Think about, maybe my emotions. Maybe those are not something that I know through the senses. But emotions, right, even the word itself indicates, motion, movement. So the way that I've been moved and changed. And you talk about being sad. I'm blue. I'm down, right? So it's starting with that. And there's this, St. Thomas Aquinas has this great quote, although by revelation we're elevated to things that would otherwise remain unknown to us, we're never raised so far as to know them in any other way than through things that can be known by the senses. So even the highest thing, right, like the Trinity, right, that's a pretty high thing. You still have to know 3. Right? If you don't know 3, you don't have the Trinity. Right? So it's like that. So babies are a good example for us. You can learn a lot from babies. Right? So physics, the study of the physical world is the first science. Right? That's the first thing we know. Right? You don't say, okay, little baby, so the Trinity, 3 persons, 1 substance. You got it? Like they're like yellow, square, right? So just, right, we we know this at some level, but we haven't had it made explicit for us. We have to start with the simple things we get from the senses. And by the way, let me just say, like that is the big sense of physics. Physics in the big sense is just that, the study of the physical world. Okay, all the equations and stuff, that's a part of it. But the bigger picture is just this larger understanding of the physical world. That's where we have to start. And so, okay, next point. Therefore, all of the branches of learning depend upon this first science. And if our physics is wrong, to that degree, so is everything else. So this is a graphic that the IEP's put in different places, but you know, the tree of truth, right? You have physics down here at the base. That's the base of the tree. Then out of that, then comes the metaphysics. Out of that grows the ethics and the politics and all the other fields, the humanities, and then finally the theology at the top of the tree. Right? So, by analogy to the tree, so if we got these roots that are bad, the tree is dying. It's not good. Right? And any problems that there are at the base only compound as you go up the tree. Okay, an equational physics, right? So there's the bullet point that this is what we have as a culture, just this equational physics, and I like this. I like this picture here. All known physics, right? Does that make sense to you? You follow that? Right? Like, whoa. So yeah, you guys know this, right? So I mean, right? That's our physics is incomplete. How can we say this is our understanding of the physical world? That's crazy. But that's what a physicist is happy with. To say, yep, done. Let's call it a day. We got this equation. So then, okay, so since all of our cultural thinking builds upon what we think of the physical world, our physics, and since our physics is an incomplete simple physics, all of our thinking is at best unstable and confused, often downright wrong and crazy. Okay, so that's our physics, but that might be your response. Well, I don't even know that equation, so I'm fine. That's those crazy physicist people. But okay, it's not so. So I mean, the thing is, what the physicist does and what he thinks filters down to all of us. And in particular, this mental habit, which we're trained to not ask what is it? What does it mean? We're trained to ask what to do. How do I use this? What can I do with this? This kind of training to work well. That's fine, but for all practical purposes, so on and so forth. That's the training that's transmitted to us from the physics. And just to kind of bring this out, like, do we know, okay, my students don't answer, and the people who've already learned stuff from my people don't answer, but I mean, could you even answer this question? Do we know what is a physical thing? I mean, how much simpler of a question can you get? Right? We don't know the answer. I mean, I don't know. Someone try? Yeah?
Based on what you said, something that can be perceived by your senses?
So, I mean, that's sort of like a pointing to definition, like, because I sense it, it's a physical thing, but then you realize, like, well, actually there's physical things that we can't sense, right? Like, okay, I can't sense infrared light or something like that, or magnetic fields or whatever. And you still learn about them through your senses. Right? So you learn about the magnetic field because you see the iron is deflected. So, okay, there must be something there. But you don't see it. And so that's the thing, is like we don't know even these simple definitions, let alone, like, what if we start asking, what's the human soul? And what does it mean to say that Christ redeems us? That's the thing, is like with the faith, we have all these profound truths that the church has given us, but if we can't answer these basic questions, I mean, come on. How can we really expect to know what it means? So that's what I'm talking about. That's the sense in which we've been had stuff transmitted to us from the physics. We don't even notice that we don't know this stuff. Like we should be bothered. Like, I really just don't know what anything is. If I ask myself, do I know what it means? But we kind of grow up and we get more and more accustomed to, okay, well this works. This is going to help me get through my life and do what I need to do. One time I had a student, we were doing this lesson in physics and I was explaining the meaning of mass, and I talked about how like the typical definition you get in a science classroom is, okay, what is mass? It's anything that has matter and takes up space. And then I said, well, what's matter? Anything that has mass. And he got so mad, he's like, what? How have I missed this my whole life? And it's like, that's just how it goes. We get these sort of substitute definitions for things that don't have it. It's a circular, I hope that's clear. Like, mass is matter, matter is mass, that doesn't mean anything. Right? But we're okay with it because we get the right number at the end of our problem. Okay, good, I get an A, good job. Right, I mean, that's the training that we get, K through 12, and then college and beyond. Okay, another kind of common thing you might be thinking, well, you know, I'm not good at that stuff anyway, so maybe I'm better off then, because I don't know the equations. And in fact, it's worse. If you don't, the less you know, the worse, because that means you're even more distant from the source of where this is all coming from the machinery that's making it all happen. So you're more downstream and more just having the conclusions programmed into the way you think. At least if you know the equations, you have number one, you get the logic and the rigor that comes with that. But then number two, you're close enough to sort of get some sense like, yeah, I see this thing over here, it's not quite right. And another thing to add to this is that you can't escape the nature of authority, which is the fact that none of us, no man is an island, right? So you all depend upon the community. We all depend upon the community. So think about okay, everything you know, all the things you know, whether it's about just the world or about God, about human nature, how many of those things did you discover independently? Honestly, isn't it true that virtually everything you know, someone else has been passed it on to you? Right? Think about, it's probably is virtually nothing for most of us, right? The process of discovery is so hard. So it really is just it's the intellectuals of the culture who go out and do that work, and the rest of us have the benefit of learning it. But on the flip side is, okay, that means we depend upon the intellectuals. And so that's the issue then. We've just received all these things, right? We've got it from our parents and from our teachers, and where did they get it? Their parents, their teachers, and so on, up the chain, and so it finally does go back to the intellectuals of the culture. And it's at the base, it's the physics, and then it goes higher up into the humanities as well. And the other thing to point out here is that we have a problem with blind belief in the modern world, which is that there's a lot of things that we think we really, really know. We think, oh, that's for sure certain. And it's actually not for us. We're just trusting somebody. But we don't realize that. That's why it's called blind belief, because you think you know it, but you don't actually know, you're just trusting. So an easy example, this is in one of the books by Dr. Anthony Rizzi, the Science Before Science. He points out, ask somebody, does the Earth go around the sun? Oh, of course it does. Everybody knows that. Okay, how do you know, right? Do you really know? And it's well, I saw a picture somewhere. There's a nice diagram in my textbook. It's but you don't know. That's the point. We think we know what we don't know. And that's just one example. There's so many things that we have strong convictions about that we feel, oh, that's completely for sure true. And we don't realize that we're taking on faith. And therefore, we don't realize that it's a kind of control that we're under. And it's a really scary kind of control because you think it's you. You think this is my mind that's working and deciding things and moving forward. And in fact, it's not. So I think this graphic is kind of a helpful illustration of how the hierarchical structure works, right? So we have the science at the base, the physics, and then that feeds the academic elite, including the philosophers, and then they train the university professors, and then it filters down finally to us through the curriculum development and through how that forms the social and political elite, and then getting to us in multiple directions. And A lot of people, when they're trying to diagnose the cultural problems, think the issue is here with the social and political elite. What's those politicians? They're so bad, and they try and do this policy and that policy, and they're manipulating people, and different social icons, and things like that. And that's way down the chain. They've been formed like we are. It's just there becomes a feedback system where they figure out what we like, and they give us what we like. That's how they succeed, right? The things that are on TV today are there because they get really good ratings, right? So you might say, well, that's a terrible thing that's on TV. Well, it's because it's what people like today. It wouldn't be on TV if it wasn't. So to kind of help you see a bit more like historically how this came into being, just very, very brief history of science. So first, have to note Aristotle. He's the one who, for the first time, gets the basic foundational principles of physics understood. He's the one who comes up with the word physics. And he sort of ushers in this period of Greek intellectual growth, but finally dies because the Greek culture wasn't one that could sustain science. The polytheistic religion and everything just made it, looking at the world and not like expecting rationality, right? That there's all these random gods that are going to randomly decide to make it rain or blow up or who knows what, right? You're not going to look and try and find causes. It's like, well, it's some crazy god. So it doesn't take off, finally. And then there's a period of time that passes until we have the birth of the church, but then it's not really until the church actually gets to Christianize the culture that science can really take the next step. So this is the Middle Ages. So this is the first robust conception of science. Right, so the first time we got to have a Christian culture, a fully Christian culture. And one of the major fruits, the first time there were ever universities. The beginning of the universities was right at this time period. The next thing to note is St. Thomas Aquinas. Again, happy to talk about him on his feast day. He's the one who clarifies and fills out the unstated conclusions in Aristotle's work, and getting that physics back that had been lost for a good time, and then takes it and deepens it and plants it in the culture. And this is when you have science really taking root, and a profound, almost 400 years of really strong growth of science. Okay, so then what happens? Then you get the scientific revolution, which has been building up to this. It's only because of the really amazing intellectual work and development of the Middle Ages that you could have this, but it's not properly understood. And this is the problem. So what is this new method? Or I don't know, maybe you want to volunteer? Like, what is the scientific method? Yeah.
You observe what you can observe, and you come with a hypothesis, and then you do tests, and then you look at the results of the tests, and confirm or adapt your hypothesis in essence.
Right. So so I'm glad you said it, because that's what we're all taught, right? So it's hypothesis, test, hypothesis, we're formulating hypothesis, and the thing is that's not the new thing, but it's what we're all taught, and that's the crazy thing, right? So like from third grade up, you have this in your book, you just read it, yeah. It's like the mass is matter, matter is mass. It's like, wait a second, this is the new thing. This is what babies do, right? Babies will take a little stick and drop it. I've watched my 1-year-old boy drop it. Oh. Do it again. Oh. He's testing his hypothesis. Oh, it's always gonna fall when I let go. It's amazing, So babies do this. It's not the new thing about modern science. So isn't that interesting, right? To think about that, right? People did this throughout all of human history. This kind of basic. By the way, it's important. You do need to do this, but it's not the new thing. The new thing is what we can call the empiriological method, and that's the output of the empiriological method, an equation. That's what's new, is that thanks to Descartes and others who developed algebra, this new method, you can make systems of symbols. And instead of now dealing directly with the things in front of your face, you have a system of symbols. And you make up rules of how to move the symbols around, and you get answers. It's amazing. I don't know if you all like algebra, but it is an amazing thing. I mean, that's what's behind all the scientific revolution. Because it makes things go at light speed. Right now, it's so hard to figure stuff out. It's like to actually discover stuff, it's so much work. But now you have this mechanical way, you can just put it into a machine and grind out answers. Right, so this is the big new thing. That again, we use it. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, we have all these things, we're a do this, do that. Not what. What is it? What does it mean? So that's what we do. We've had this method we've been using for 400 years, very successfully in some ways. And this is like the brief timeline, right? So 1600, Descartes and Galileo, usher in the revolution in math and physics. And then within the century, you got Newton, who, again, that equation I just put on the screen, F equals ma, that's like all the motion in the universe in one equation. Think about that. It's a big deal, right? So then, next up you got Maxwell with electricity, magnetism, and then Einstein, special relativity, general relativity, quantum mechanics, or Schrodinger, and all the others. This is like only 325 years. It's amazing, right? Like it's more stuff has been figured out this time than all the rest of human history combined. The only problem is we don't know what it means. It works. We get crazy results. It's just so successful, but we don't know anything about what it means. And just to illustrate this, that like how this works. So this is an equation alone physics. That's all we have is just the equation. So I have a couple quotes. This is Newton at the beginning of his big, amazing work, the Principia, where he lays out the mechanics. I design here to only give a mathematical notion of those forces without considering their physical causes and seats. Okay, just the equations. And it's because he's so smart that he realizes that's all I've got to give you. I have nothing else. I have no understanding of what it means. And in more recent times, Richard Feynman, amazing physicist, contributed so much to quantum field theory and other areas. You know, this is the beginning of a textbook he writes on electricity and magnetism. You might ask me to explain. What is an electromagnetic field? I'm sorry, I can't do that for you. I don't know how. Let's read the rest of the textbook. 400 more pages of it. Again, it's amazing equational work, but you know, we don't know what it means. And these are the smarter guys who actually realize, yeah, we don't know what it means. It's the lesser minds who are in a more state of confusion of like, thinking, yeah, oh, it makes sense, it makes sense. It's really the brightest ones who can see through it. You know what that picture is supposed to be?
Undead cat.
the dead and not dead cat. So just I'll talk about that, but just a few different things that you get. And I guess let me say this first before I go through these. The issue, like, okay, I showed you have Newton and Feynman and among others who realize, yeah, I don't know what's going on. But it's not as simple as that, because what happens is we're not literally robots, so we cannot literally just input equation, output equation. We have to have something to hold on to, some meaning. And so what ends up happening is we sort of do a practical, let me just kind of make an explanation up of, okay, yeah, this causes this causes this and stuff. Some kind of narrative that we use so we can organize and know how to work through the equations. Otherwise, we would just explode. I mean, it wouldn't work. So what ends up happening is it's all half-baked. It's all this stuff that is contradictory, is completely against common sense, but we keep it because it works. It lets us get through the equations. And then in the process, we dismantle our common sense, and then it filters down the chain. So these are a few examples of the ways that we think about, like physicists think about modern physics, right? So motion doesn't require cause. Right, think about that. Motion doesn't require cause. That means something comes from nothing. So, you know, so much for God, right? I mean, God is now just an extra thing you add into your Catholic, so I guess you like that stuff, so fine, you can have God if you want, but I don't need it. Time time is the fourth dimension, right? The fabric of space-time. So we're equating extension with change, right? So that's going to lead to all kinds of problems if you make that kind of confusion. The cat is alive and dead at the same time, right? I mean, people, by the way, it's like, this is literally what you're taught if you do a physics degree. And that last point is part of what's called the orthodox interpretation of quantum mechanics. Think about that, that's orthodox. The universe creates itself from nothing, that's general relativity there. We live in a multiverse, that's the latest, most popular theory in quantum mechanics. So this is the kind of stuff that we get, and then just think about it. If that's what our physicists think, that's what the base intellectuals of the culture think, just think about how that propagates up the tree of truth. It kills the tree in a way, but not in just any way. It makes the tree petrified. It's a very cold, inhuman thing at all the levels. But the thing is with this tree is it just turns to rock. It doesn't fall over and just die. It just turns to rock. So it's not like everything will just collapse and we'll start over and everything will be happy again. It's like, no, like because of the technological advances we have a way to sustain it. Right? So we can be more and more inhuman with the way that we treat each other and the way we think about the world, because we can just invent new drugs and medical procedures and forms of entertainment that can keep our mind up and keep ourselves surviving in this inhuman state. And again, to just throw that diagram up, now hopefully you can see a little bit better, like, okay, if this is what the physicists think, it filters up through all the intellectuals. The metaphysics, the way that we think about morality today, it's mostly rule systems. And finally, even the faith itself, we misunderstand the faith. Just to point this out, popes have been sounding the alarm on this. And what I mean by sounding the alarm is that they've sensed something's deeply wrong, and we're going to start majorly losing meaning, even the faith itself. So this is St. Pius X. This is in encyclical on St. Thomas. He's talking about if we lose the principles of St. Thomas, if they're removed, it must necessarily follow the students of the sacred sciences will ultimately fail to perceive so much as the meaning of the words in which the dogmas of divine revelation proposed by the magistracy of the church. We'll have words, we'll say this dogma or whatever, but we won't know what it means. And very succinctly, John Paul II, the matter is urgent. Contemporary developments in science challenge theology deeply. So that's what I'm saying. It's not that they knew explicitly, it's the physics, we gotta fix the physics and stuff, but they can see that there's something really wrong and have been calling us to do something about it. So just to say shortly, there is a conflict between science and faith. There's so many people who us Catholics, we like to say, no, there's no problem. It's all fine. It's just some people spin it the wrong way. Doesn't mean atheists out there, But there is. It's not. Now, there's no conflict between true science and the faith, but we don't have a true science. Our science is disordered. It has all these good things in it, but the meaning is all distorted and messed up, and until that gets healed, there is a deep conflict. But it goes further than this, right? It's not just the faith, it's a conflict between modern science and reality. Because it's not just the faith. Obviously, the faith is a big deal, but it's even just, like you said at the beginning, am I a man or am I a woman? What does that even mean, right? Is reality real? Is the world even there, right? If you talk to young people, you'll find out that that's, they're unsure. I don't know. Not sure if reality is real. Maybe it's just an illusion. Maybe we're living in a simulation. And that's seriously being taken. So this is, enter IAP. This is really where the IAP comes in. So major achievements are, number one, recovering the basic physics that Aristotle had, that St. Thomas planted in the Middle Ages, but that has been lost since the scientific revolution. So recovering those basic principles that St. Thomas taught, Aristotle taught, but then doing the next level work and grounding modern science in those principles. And so there's 3 textbooks that have been put out so far on mechanics, electricity, magnetism, and quantum mechanics. So that's up through the 1920s. That actually have the science completely grounded. So that's a major fruit. And then on the more general audience end are resources that help just the average person recover these principles in a way that we need as moderns, right? Like for us moderns, it really doesn't work to just go, oh, I'm just going to go pick up Aristotle and start reading. You can't do it because we have the cultural problems that we have. We need help getting Aristotle, help getting St. Thomas. And so these resources get those principles to us in a way adapted to the state that we're in. So like that first one there, Kids' Introduction to Physics. And it's like, okay, for kids. No, it's not really just for kids. It's at a level that a kid can understand. So like you can even read it to like a 6-year-old and he can actually follow it and understand it. But it's really, you should think it's for the kid in you. Okay? Because you didn't get it when you were a kid. So it's really good. I think everyone should get it and think about those things. Then there's the Science Before Science, which is a book that really helps us see the cultural problems that we have, and then goes through and gets us grounded with the basic physics and the truths about our human nature, truths about God and morality, and about modern science. Then there's DVD, Decision for Truth, which sort of deals with how do we live in the modern world and grapple with this anti-truth culture that we have. And there's a DVD, the Physics for First Communion DVD, which is basically going through the kids' book, but helping a child prepare for First Communion and actually be able to understand what transubstantiation is, what's going on. You need the physics to do that. And there's all kinds of articles and stuff on the website you can find. But we did bring some articles here that you can purchase if you want. One's it's a sort of oriented for Catholics, trying to understand what's happened to the faith in the modern world and how it's related to the physics. So, so how does the church call us to respond? So think about this for a second. How did Christ summarize his own mission? Why did he say he came? What was the summary he gave? Do you know?
To show us the truth.
Yeah. So you have the advantage of being one of my students. That's not exactly fair, but yeah, but by the way, I should say, like, most people cannot say this. Like, oh, to save us from our sins? That's what he said? That's not what he said. He said, for this I have come, for this I was born to testify to the truth. He who hears the truth hears me. Right, so, the sins, obviously, but that's the negative side. Like, this is the positive goal that we're going towards. And that's how he summarizes his mission. That's right, Pilate's questioning him. This is the on-the-spot summary he gives. And think, God says in the Old Testament, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And think about that, right? So, like, that's the thing. We have to reassess the way that we think about the faith. We tend to think of it mainly in terms of sin and bad will and stuff like that. We don't think about the need for truth. And we tend to not pray that way. God, help enlighten my mind. I need truth. Help direct me to fundamental, life-giving truth. We don't know that the intellectual life is at the core of the spiritual life, so we've got to recover that. Right, so I don't know if you know this. John Paul II's encyclical, it's called Ex Corde Ecclesia. He says, what comes out of the heart of the church? Yeah?
Is it truth?
No? It's a good guess. He doesn't, some things, he doesn't say the soup kitchen, he doesn't say the hospital, he says the university comes out of the heart of the church. And again, it's not to say, of course, soup kitchens are good and hospitals are good, we need those things, but the highest thing, right? So if you think about as Catholics, hopefully you know the works of mercy, maybe, right? So there's the spiritual works of mercy, the corporal works of mercy. And the spiritual are the higher ones. And the highest of the spiritual works is to instruct the ignorant. We've got to recover that back, that the centrality of truth for the faith. We've got to get that back. And we have to notice that the scientism, this disordered science that we have, I should say, for the scientism, the issue is that because we have this modern scientific method, it works with these systems of symbols and stuff, these equations. Because of the way that works, the only thing that really works well is like physics and math and things like at that level. Chemistry a little bit. It doesn't work well with literature and history and ethics and stuff like that. And so what we end up getting trained is that, well, okay, that stuff's all subjective then. Morality, subjective. Religion, subjective. The real stuff, physics, math. That's what's true. And so so the scientism teaches us deeply that there's just no truth, right? Agree to disagree. You have your truth, I have my truth. That's what we get formed in. And so we have to watch out for that, and we have to see that there's this primal mortal sin that we're tempted to in the modern world, which is to know, yeah, there is some fundamental truth out there, and I don't have it, but I don't care. I've got too much going on, A lot of appointments, I've got all these things going on in my life, I don't have time. You got to really have that kind of examination of conscience. And we have to really take care to not let religious practices be a substitute for this growth that we're called to. It's supposed to be that the graces that God gives us are going to help us grow in truth, amplify that possibility in our life. So we have to not just fill ourselves up even with just tons of religious activities that block us from then, wait, do I know what my life means and what the world is and what's going on? Do I know what a physical thing is? Can I answer that basic question? We should be going to adoration and asking God, please enlighten me, help me have the grace to understand these things. Right? We don't want to be like this, right? Which is basically how we're set up to be. Right? Just activity, activity, activity. There's no time, no space to really think, to contemplate, even to have real conversations with people. Right? And to invoke St. Thomas here, the greatest kindness one can render any man consistent leading him from error to truth. Right? So, some things to say that we've got to get humility back. And the primary meaning of humility is openness to truth. That's one of that article I was mentioning. Something mentioned there is, how can we claim to understand the invisible, right? The amazing, great, invisible God when we do not understand the visible. And you might say, well, I think I'm okay still. I have a good sense of right and wrong. And the thing is, we have to digest that we are living on the fumes of Western civilization. Right? That the image of Notre Dame on fire, I think, is a profound image that has lots of meaning, right? That kind of represents where we're at. It's all going up in smoke. We no longer have a ciencia, a knowledge, cultural knowledge that supports proper morality and religion. We have a scientism, and if we don't reground our thinking, all the good things that we still have and have an attraction to, the faith and basic morals and stuff, those things will be taken away from us. So we've got to get that regrounded. So just briefly to say this, you might be like, well, okay, well, that's nice, but where do I fit into this? I'm not a physicist, so there is in the Institute for Advanced Physics, obviously, there's membership. There's people who are PhDs in physics, but then there's other levels of membership, bachelor's degrees and volunteer members. But even aside from that, everyone, we should all learn the material, help our friends and family do the same. It's a good idea, reach out, try and get a study group started. We shouldn't just do this by ourselves, right? Actually work with the community, try and learn it together. And try to do what you can to contribute to the work of IUP, especially with prayers and also donations as you're able to. And we, a lot of these things we have here that you can look at. Some of the things we have that you can buy, like the kids' instruction to physics, you can buy some articles you can buy if you want, and then there's places you can sign up if you want to just get more information or get in contact. And so I'd just like to close with this Chesterton quote. He said, "The trouble with the modern disputant, which is really each one of us, is that he does not understand the case for his own convictions. He's never gone back far enough in his own argument. He's forgotten the very nature of first principles. First principles are the very last principles he's likely to think about." Right? So let's not be like that. Let's go back to first principles. Get the basic physics and reground our lives and get towards the truth. Okay? Well, thank you. Any questions?
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
Okay.
What's your name?
My name is Ryder.
Ryder. Okay.
I've got like 5 or 6 things spinning through my head.
Yeah.
I thought it was really good. The whole beginning of that talk kind of explained to me why I hated physics. I loved all the other sciences.
Yeah.
I hated physics,
I see.
and it's the only class that I got like a C
I see.
because I didn't try. Because it was kind of disturbing to me. But I guess the biggest thing that's on my mind is like, I get everything you said and I follow that, but like these people who are in the front of science now, who are all about empiricism and equations, they don't really know how it works, but it does. Like, if you could kind of summarize, I guess this goes into some of the materials in IAB, but like, what is like the basic refutation of that? Because the way I see it is like, that feels very wrong, and it's it's something that disturbs me on a daily basis for sure. It kind of fits in to a more broader worldview that I have, but like the science and stuff and technology that they're doing, it's still like cutting edge and it works, and it's very powerful too, because you said that scientism kind of says that there is no truth. It says that to an extent, but I would say a corollary to that is that the truth is in the power, because modern science and industry basically just concentrates power, and all the recent inventions and the whole aim of technological progress is like to do more for less, like more output for less input, basically. So seems like there's kind of a fundamental truth claim in that, like this stuff works. So they seem kind of at odds in that respect.
Okay. So I mean, to address the first thing you're asking about, like what is the reputations of the sort of, contradictory things that are being said and the absence of meaning. The refutation is not like a one-sentence thing, but it's, it is contained in the textbooks and stuff, but basically it's just, look, it's not a rejection of the equations. The equations are good, but it's saying, look, we've got to actually do the hard work of really unpacking the meaning. And, you talk to a physicist, a lot of them, you start having this conversation, they'll admit, like, yeah, that is a problem. I don't have time for it right now, or whatever, It's not like there's a hardness to seeing, like, oh, I'm just not going to talk about this or whatever. It's just you have to get people to slow down and say, look, first of all, this doesn't make any sense, and show the contradictory nature. But then second of all, so how do you walk through it? So you have to start with what you see, and go, where the evidence takes you. Okay, we're trying to figure out what the cause of locomotion is. Let's talk about the experiment, work it out, see what's evident to us, and then go step by step and say, okay, so this is the cause, this is the effect, and so on. So, I mean, you have to dive into the equations. You have to really dive in. And that's what the textbooks have done, and that's taken the work of, several really smart PhD physicists, led by Dr. Anthony Rizzi, to do that unpacking work. So is that?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, what I'm interested in, I guess, is like what are the metaphysics of the people who actually believe in that stuff, like full stop, like.
The metaphysics of like the standard physicists today?
Yeah, people who believe the cat is both dead and alive, and they.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like it's like what I was trying to say is that when you have these, contradictory things, you're led to abandon God and to adopt we just need a morality that just works. So this seems to work the best. Let everybody do what he wants, don't bother him, and stuff like that. I mean, it's just, it's not like there's a. I think that's probably the simplest way to say it. Like God is blocked out logically from those bad starting principles, and so you go towards atheism, and then you have a just sort of morality, just leave everyone to himself. Does that address that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, it's, the other thing to say would be that, these people would say there's no point in thinking about metaphysics because there's not, it doesn't work with equations and stuff, so it's all subjective.
Right, but then you can also say like, why think at all? Because
Right.
you can't equate thinking.
Right. And there is a larger trajectory to this, which is that finally, this way of thinking will undermine the equational science itself. It's like, why should we keep doing this? Why should we keep trying to advance the equations? If there is no truth, what am I looking for? And we're not quite there yet. Still people go into physics because, we want to understand the universe. And there's that. That's the thing, the physicists are really good in the modern world as being like some of this last class of people that actually think there's actually something out there to understand. I'm going to go after it. That's the really good thing about physicists. But yeah, on the flip side, it's crazy things that they're thinking, and they're just logical with it and go with it. So, anyone else? Yeah, man.
I have kind of a specific question about the comparison between the scientific method, I guess the classical one,
Yeah.
and the empiriological method. You said, I guess you could say that the scientific method, one that we've always been doing, is more grounded in like the senses and like what you can see directly through testing our hypothesis, right? Whereas the empiriological method is based more on like equations and stuff, which seems to be a little bit more confounding, right? Like seems to be the confounding thing in society that's causing problems. But if the textbooks, like we're all trained in the regular science, the classical scientific method, wouldn't that be better than training people in the empiriological method? Because like you kind of call that out as if it's a bad thing that that's all we get, but it seems as if that would be more grounded in the empiriological method.
Just to be clear, when I talked about all that stuff, I'm just saying that, number one, the standard definition we give for the scientific method, which is in all the typical books that you read, is not the new modern scientific method. So that, number one, that's that point. But then number two, we do still use the new method. We don't realize what it is. So any book about, biology, chemistry, physics, or whatever you have is using that method. It just doesn't realize that this is the new thing that we're using. Just calling the old thing
So it's
the
using
scientific.
the new thing while still calling it the old.
Right. And by the way, the sort of insidious thing about that is that if you think that that's what's new, hypothesis, test hypothesis, reformulated hypothesis, if you think that's what's new, then you logically think everybody in the past, they were idiots, right? Because how can you not do that? You must, thank God for Galileo. He ushered in the era of light, right? The reason, that's what people say, right? Like Galileo was the first one to use reason and experiment. It's just so crazy. But that's the power of it. Like, it's all a big muddle. And that's, by the way, like that's what the devil thrives on, is like taking advantage of the confusion. It's like this sublimely orchestrated thing of messing our brains up. Because it facilitates, that's why I can dismiss the whole Catholic faith. And all those, Aristotle, he's a dummy too. There's, by the way, in many books, physics books will make fun of Aristotle. Aristotle thought that air had to push things to make it move, idiot, it's like, okay, he was wrong about that, but he got all the foundation right. But we've rejected that, so it's convenient to throw them away. But did that address
Yeah,
the scientific method issue?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, Gary?
What is knowledge, and is it fair to say that I know the principle of non-contradiction? Or is that misguided, or is that the wrong way of stating it?
Okay. So I mean, a knowledge, so I mean, to just say it here, like this is really a question that you really want to dive into the science before science, to walk up to it, to actually see it, because there's more preliminary things you want to understand to really get it, but simply, knowledge is a kind of unity, a conformity with you and the thing that you know. So like if I say I know blue, I know the blueness of that bench over there, that's, I'm in contact, intellectual contact with that thing. And so as far as like, do I know the principle of non-contradiction? Well, I don't know if you know it, but you can know it. I mean, and I should say that differently. Everybody knows it, but insofar as we've been confused by the modern culture, it may be all messed up in our heads. Right, I mean, everybody at least has a confused knowledge that like, if this is here, then my hand cannot be in the same place at the same time. It can't be both, right? They can't share the same place. If I put my hand into here, the bottle's got to bend in, or my hand breaks, or something. But it can't be both in the same place at the same time, right? And the cat is not alive and dead at the same time. That's something that people know, intuitively know. But that's the thing, is that we have to get that fixed. We have to, it's like these basic physics principles are things that everybody kind of half knows already, but it's been entangled and distorted. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. Anybody else? Yes.
Do you think that the nihilism that's evolved out of this morass is what's leading many people back to a desire for the simplicity of those basic relationships with one another, the basic recognition of the importance of community, relationship with the earth? Do you think that that is one of the maybe positive things that is coming out of reaching this almost like nihilistic apex where people recognize it's either suicide, individual suicide, which is rampant, or the suicide of the culture, or a return to something more basic?
Yeah. So I mean, so first, there is this profound nihilism. This sort of, there is no meaning. Life is just emptiness and so forth. That is increasingly rampant. And, I think it's actually the opposite direction. It's not pushing people towards community, it's pushing people towards isolation. And some of the ways you can see how this is going is like this sort of cancel culture that we're developing. Oh, this guy disagrees with us, let's just shut him out. This tendency to just say, I have my people that I align with, and then I hold on to them, but as soon as I disalign, I can just leave them, drop them. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but especially like the AI stuff that's, developing, it's like people have made these apps that like, instead of actually talking to people, you can have a chatbot that's pretty good, I'll send messages back and forth with my chatbot, and it's crazy. I found this like on one of these app store things. It's like one of these apps has like tens of thousands of 5-star reviews, and I was reading some of the reviews. It's like, talking to this is better than talking to my real friends. It actually has more of a dynamic interchange with me than my real friends do. And so I think it's scary. It's actually, we're getting more, less intelligent and more self-isolating, and with the AI stuff, we'll have a way to kind of just completely close off. And the stuff with the environment is like a kind of substitute for God and for,
And yet even
highest
within that, you see people who are coming back to the faith.
Yeah.
People who have indulged in the pornographic extremes, the hedonistic extremes, and then discovering the Catholic faith and being on fire.
Yeah.
I think that we're maybe turning a corner in that realization of science is basically in conflict with reality. You know, and we saw what happened during COVID when science was telling us one thing and our own experience of what was going on was telling us something different. So people, I think we're turning a corner. You listen to someone like Jordan Peterson, who is wrestling with God,
Right.
and you realize that even great intellects, modern intellects, are struggling with this.
Yeah.
So I think there is hope.
Yeah, so let me comment on that. I mean, so there definitely are people, even notable people like Peterson and others who are, you know, very public and pushing back on the cultural insanity and trying to, you know, converting and stuff like that. But I think that, you know, I had this slide about the fumes of Western civilization. That's what's going on, is that, you know, the scientism, there's a reason, like, why didn't we get transgenderism in the 1600s? Why is it only in the 2020s we're getting that? It's because the world was not ready for it. You can't just 90-degree turn, swing the culture into insanity,
Yeah.
right? So the culture has to be prepared, and there's going to be different, you know, accelerations and stops into the next level of insanity. And so one of the things I think that's happened recently, definitely, around the time of COVID and stuff, is like there was a kind of jerk into like, whoa, things just got a lot more morally chaotic and messed up, and that kind of created a reaction with people who still have a sense, some emotional tie to the past, like, wait a second, this is not quite right. And so then there's a kind of backlash. But I think it's, you know, it's like, if you think of like a graph or something, it's still down, it's just there's a little like, you know, and you know, one I think a helpful example to kind of illustrate this is like, you think of like, oh, you know, so polarized in our country, conservatives and liberals, you know, they're so at odds with each other. It's like, well, if you look at it, okay, there's a lot of heat, a lot of tension, but in terms of the principles, it's so aligned. And one of the things that brings that out is like, think about how, you know, what, maybe 10, 15 years ago or something, both conservatives and liberals were against homosexual marriage. Okay? Fast forward a couple years, then it's only the liberals against it, and now no one's against it, really. Right? So everyone's kind of morphing into the same thing, but along the way into this transition into the scientism, there will be starts where it's like, no, that was a bit too fast. And people kind of like, this is too much. And then go to the faith or something like that. But it finally doesn't solve the problem. Like I gave that Pius X quote, right? It's still true that you might still have an attraction to the faith, but you won't know what it means unless you get these basic principles back. And so there are the people who will respond and say, this is too much. I'm going to cling to the church, I'm going to cling to the faith. But again, it's increasingly opaque to us. If we don't know what is the substance, how can we hope to talk about what transubstantiation is, or what being Christ is consubstantial with the Father? That doesn't mean anything. We can say it, but right, what is a human soul? Right? If we don't know those things, then it'll be just a kind of emotional thing. It won't be anything that reaches our minds. So I mean, I think there is hope in the sense that like there are certain things that trigger people to like care and wake up a little bit more. And I think increase the receptivity for what the Institute for Advanced Physics is doing, to say, wait, I'm looking for answers. I realize there's a void of truth, and I think that is an opening to get people, because what has to happen is we've got to join together as a community and getting these principles all together. And I think the hope is there that people can be woken up, and like the examples you cite, and come together in these truths. Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Williams, I got a question, I guess. I think first of all, I think your presentation makes a really good call about, you know, getting into the science and the knowledge of the science, and there's correction that is needed. But I'm wondering how you reconcile also that not everybody's gonna be a physicist.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So,
Exactly.
so in the big picture, we are all called to be saints,
Right.
right? So, and the Holy Spirit, as we know, is going to provide some physicists, maybe someone's here, or a lot of kids here.
Yeah.
But also there is people that are not going to get to that level of depth
Right.
about knowledge. So how you reconcile that, the call for those kind of souls, also people, so how you actually
Yeah.
reconcile the need for those people too, that they will never potentially go to that level of depth, but it's also needed, right? The truth is not necessarily scientific truth, but
Right.
other type of truth, right? So how you reconcile, I guess, those two, or in the
Yeah.
context of
Yeah, very good
physics, I
question.
guess.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. That's really good. I mean, so first of all, of course, yeah, not everyone's supposed to be a physicist. I mean, good news, right? Woo, I was worried for a second. But yeah, not everyone's supposed to be a physicist. We all, right? Like we all have different gifts, right? One body, many parts, right? The eye, the head, all the different parts. So that's absolutely true. So then what you have to see is like there's a hierarchical structure to the community, right? In the intellectual community, right? So there's going to be the leaders and the followers. There'll be some people whose responsibility, who it is their vocation to go out and fight this intellectual battle and actually hash out, what is the meaning of quantum field theory? That's not everyone's vocation. But everyone, the thing is, like, we have to, I put up all those slides to emphasize that, like, truth really is at the center of the faith, right? The Christ statement, for this I have come, for this I was born to testify to the truth. That is the center of the faith. Not all of us are called to be PhD, whatever, but we have to have that orientation towards growth and truth. And so we need to get at least the basics. So like, I talked about that kid's introduction to physics. It's something that a 6-year-old can understand. Everyone should do that. Everyone should get like a 6-year-old's levels knowledge. And everyone should really do more than that. But, I think, between the two, the kid's introduction to physics, which does that most basic level stuff, and the science before science, which takes it up to like, okay, it's a non-negotiable. To be a human being, you have to think about God, morality, what am I? What does it mean to be a human being, Those are things that are common to everybody independent of your vocation. But then it does go a little bit farther, especially like as Americans living in, this is the capital of the scientific world, we do have a little bit more, expected of us, and especially add to that we're Catholics, we're supposed to be the leaders in some level. Again, not everyone PhD, whatever, but we should have at least the orientation towards truth, and we should get at least those kinds of principles in our lives. And then, with our respective vocations, whether you're doctor, lawyer, a teacher, a nurse, artist, whatever you are, whatever your homemaker, whatever your vocation is, you have to then find out, how do I incarnate these things in this vocation? And that is part and parcel of becoming a saint. Living in concordance with the truth, conformity with the truth. So that's, and we all, and as Catholics, we should seek out the sacraments to help us do that. That grace can help dispel error and help strengthen our minds. Does that answer it?
Yeah, thank you very much. And also, if I mind another question, and at home we've been actually watching a lot of demonology stuff, so to understand how the demon act on our lives has been very enlightening. So I'm wondering if you have any perspective how the demon has been actually be part of this problem that you're describing. What are the signs that probably we need to watch out to avoid following more error and those kind of things?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, right? Because this is all about, this is part of the spiritual warfare that's going on around us. And one of the things that people tend to think when they think, oh, the devil and the demons and stuff like that, like they're gonna try and scare us, with a really ugly, scary face, and that's how the devil works, is to just frighten us, or just simply just do this bad thing. Why don't you go do this lustful thing, or this greedy thing, or dishonest thing? And it goes way deeper than that. The devil is way smarter than all of us. Right? He's like the highest of the angels, so he's pretty smart. And he knows that we're made for truth, and that's the chief thing to disrupt, is to get in the way of that. And so the chief thing to do is to confuse us. And right, like I had that slide with the chicken with the head cut off. That's what he wants. For us to be so swallowed up in activity that we have no time to think, no time to contemplate, ask, what am I? What am I doing? What does my life mean? Just stay in the fog, right? I don't know if you've read the Screw Tape Letters, but C.S. Lewis, that book is amazing. It's like, he starts off the book, and like one of the things he says, like, this is, if you don't know about the book, it's like, the premise is like a senior demon writing to a lower ranking demon, giving advice, how are you gonna get the soul to hell? And like from the first part of the book, it's like, no, don't argue with him. No, that's the enemy's ground, that's God's ground, right? Because God works off of argument and rationality. No. Get him thinking about how it sounds and all this other stuff. Get him caught up in the stream of activity. And so that's really, the demons are having a heyday now because the culture is set up perfectly for this. And it's just so easy to fill up our lives with all kinds of stuff and not say, you know what, where's the time in my life to sit down and think and learn basic truth? So that, there's definitely more to say, but that's really where the demons are really having a lot of success.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not sure how to formulate the question, but Adam and Eve had perfect knowledge in regard, or at least what would you say, like unfallen knowledge. They
Right.
knew that the apple was, pleasing to the eye and good for eating.
Right.
And their sin was in the will. And is that correct?
Yeah, so sin is always in the will.
Sin is in the
Right.
will.
Sin is any deliberate action against right reason.
If you were, do you risk missing the sin with it? Do you risk missing the sin, missing a focus on addressing sin and sinfulness of your own heart by an overemphasis on the intellect, reason, science?
No, it's a very good question. Like all the stuff I'm talking about, I'm focusing on the error, the intellectual confusion, the problems there. I haven't really spoken much about the will. I did point out that one of the sort of chief temptation in the modern world is to commit this sin of just not caring. That is in the will. To know there's truth, but I don't care. I've got too much on my plate. That is in the will. But the thing is, like, you can't even sin if you don't know what the truth is. Right? You can only sin if you know it's wrong. If you really know something is wrong. So like if you think about the people that are, transgender stuff and all those people, we should really hesitate to think that they're actually sinning, subjectively sinning, that they know what they're doing is wrong. They might be probably are really confused and have been told by all kinds of people, their counselors, parents, and so many people have fed to their life, you follow your heart, do this and all this stuff. And so they're confused. And so it's not even sin yet. And so we have to address the intellect first. The intellect is primary. So then you can understand what's true and therefore what's right and what's wrong. And then comes the challenge. Okay, now do the right thing, now that you know it. But you first have to get that clarity. So this, it doesn't, I'm not saying like, oh, all the world's problems are solved the day that people understand physics. No, we still have our fallen human nature. So that is a real problem to address bad will, and that's the thing, that's already there. That's always been there since the fall, that bad will. That the fallen human nature which makes it easy to sin and do those kinds of things. But if we want to begin to heal things, we've got to at least get that clarity. Because right now we're talking past each other. We're not, to the degree that people say, that's wrong, the transgender, this is wrong, and so forth. We're not answering. We can't tell them what is a man, what's a woman. We can't tell them those things. And so how do we help them say, yeah, you're doing the wrong thing, doing those surgeries and stuff like that? Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to see that, if you want to think of it like this, I might have said at the beginning, but, and by the way, the article over there actually talks about the meaning of the fall. And what did it mean to take that apple from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and why was that wrong, and what does it mean, and everything else. But the thing is, with original sin has been present since then, but the thing with the scientism is it just amplifies it. So again, all of human history, there's been original sin, all kinds of problems and so forth, and now we have an amplifier. But we've got to take that amplifier out. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
So, a lot of this meditation you kind of detailed the tangled mess that's happens and been getting worse and worse over time, and also periods of time where we just advance knowledge. What do you think really catalyzed that start of us really losing the focus on what's true and what's real, and start focusing on what are these numbers and what can we do with them?
Like for the wider culture?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like I said, the scientific revolution is 1600s, but that really is only affecting the intellectuals at that point. The average person is not being affected. The average person doesn't know how to read. And there's no mass media system and everything, so it's largely just confined to the intellectuals. And so, it is advancing, right? You do have the intellectuals coming up with stuff, and then that affects the development of governments and so forth, and the advent of communism and all these things. All that stuff is happening. You have America over here, which is the first country that actually is based on principles ever. So there's this sort of interesting interplay of things happening, but you don't really see the scientism accelerate to the common man until the 1960s. And that what's happening is that, for the first time you're going to get universal education. Right, in the 1950s, you're going to get universal education, and so everybody's getting K through 12 school. And then more than that, we're being connected by radio and television and so forth, and so you're going to get a culture that's gradually going to be formed through all their curriculum and all this stuff, plus the quick communication of the things that are happening. But still, it takes time, right? That doesn't just make it go overnight, okay, now school shootings started happening and so forth. It still takes time because there's a lot of good formation from the past, from Christian culture, that people have. And so there's a kind of tension in that. The good formation, the fumes of Western civilization, and the scientism, which is now reaching every person. And so, you really see the major cultural shift in America in the 1960s. And then it's just getting worse since then. Does that make sense?
Well, I asked the why behind what really caused it to start getting worse on this?
The cause is that before it was confined to the intellectuals, but now having K through 12 education for everyone and all the mass communications, now it can get to every person. And so once the whole population has it, then you're going to see crazy advances in all the problems. Does that make sense? That's the cause. It's like the principles were already there in the 1600s, but it has to take time to, one, propagate through the intellectuals to get into all the different branches of learning, so how to get it into the metaphysics, into the politics, into the arts and everything else, and then get it to the common man, which is when you reach the masses. And that really doesn't happen until the 20th century, through the universal education and the communications. So is that all for you? You just need a vehicle to get the principles to everybody. Once it's to everybody, you're gonna have a crazy advance of disorder. Now people, right, you act according to what you think, right? If you don't think it, you can't act according to it. So, yeah.
I think he was also, I might be wrong, but I feel like he was also kind of asking like who actually started the bad principles? Like when did that spawn in and then start propagating to the intellectuals? Is that like with Newton and people starting to say like, okay, I can't give a causal explanation for these things, having a mathematical notation?
Is that what you're asking?
I think it's part of it too.
Okay. I mean, you know, there's a longer story to say about like, you know, who the sort of intellectual players are. Right? I mean, Newton's doing the stuff in physics and the other physicists I said, but then there's other key players in other domains. Like Kant is really crucial in the metaphysics to kind of codify, okay, this is the disordered metaphysics that results from a bad physics. That's now implanted there. And then you have other people, like Marx, obviously, with communism, sort of takes it into the politics. And then it just keeps going. So there's a much more detailed, interesting thing to dig into about like who the players are that make each next advance in the tree of truth, you know, all the different branches of learning. But yeah, I mean, that's happening basically, yeah, leading up until early 1900s. I mean, it still continues, but that a lot of the stuff that was sufficient to cause major problems was developed in that time.
Do the books go into that?
So the Science Before Science does go into intellectual history at some level. And then there's also a lot of articles that go into some of the specifics about like the politics and the history and other things. You know, like political history. So you can look at those articles on the website. Everyone should grab one of those flyers over there, which just has like a sheet of like resources and where you can find stuff. And that'd be good to have. Well, just so you know, there are some other IMP members here. There's John Paul and Kevin, and there's Isaac over here. So you feel free to talk to any of us. We'll be around for a bit. And then, if you want to sign up for anything or look at the resources, you can do that. So I think why don't we move to that then?
Thank you.